June 1st. So Arnett, did you kind of already do roll call, or do we have to go through it officially?
I'll go through it really quickly. Okay. And I see who's here. So I see Ms. Bates, here. Mr. Bowman is present, Mr. Gussenberg is present, Ms. Harrigan is present, not pregnant.
And I'm not pregnant. Please do not start that rumor.
Sorry. Oh, it's been a long Monday. Chair Kemp is here. Mr. Martelli is here. Mr. Martinez is here. Mr. Ness is here. Ms. Nichols is here. Mr. Pangaro is here. Mr. Perugini is not present at the moment. Mr. Talbot is here. Mr. Walsh is here. Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Okay, great. If we could all stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. All right. First up on our agenda is meeting minute approval from our last meeting on May 20th. Everyone's had a chance to review them.
So moved.
Thank you, Peter.
Second.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? I think everyone was there. Okay, perfect. Those pass. All right, so I'm happy that today, last meeting, we obviously heard a presentation from the staff input meetings that happened across the district. And this evening, we're actually going to hear the presentation from our out-of-district tour subcommittee. I know their mission was cut a little bit short with the close of the schools. They had other visits on the docket, but did get through, I want to say, at least 4 district visits. So they have a presentation that they'll take us through. So I'm going to hand it over to Sylvia. Are you taking us through that presentation? With some help up, you're still muted.
Are you ready for us first? We will be happily.
Yep, we are, if you're ready.
Okay. You all received, I think probably today from Arnett, a written version of the notes that we took on our visits to school, and we have prepared for you a slide presentation that, unlike some that have been 71 slides, ours is not that long. It'll be very quick. We're going to show you some photographs and give you some general observations that we had in the places that we went. The committee composed of Ann Harrigan, Matt Bowman, Rich Gussenberg, and myself, and Jeff Solon was on every one of those trips, and he arranged them, so we want to thank him for doing that. So we began in North Haven. Rich, do you have, or Arnett, can you bring the PowerPoint presentation up so that we can start at that?
I can. I will.
Okay, so we began on the road in the latter part of February, and you can can I click these slides, or Rich, can you move them forward for me, or how do we move them?
I have to do it.
Yeah,
okay.
Arnett's running it right now.
Oops.
Fine. Perfect.
Ooh.
So
yeah, but how do I go back?
I don't know.
Hang on.
Okay, that's all
You'll
right.
just be able to use your arrow buttons. Yeah.
Yeah,
You want me to do it?
Okay.
Arnett, you want me to do it?
If you want to, I can. Let me.
This brings
Yeah, my arrow.
Yeah, Rich was who did this presentation for us, because I was totally technologically challenged putting it physically together. So if we can start at the beginning, we can skip one of those slides until we get it ready. We'll start at the beginning, but we were charged with looking at school districts that had similar demographics to our town, that had projects that were similar to the types of projects. Obviously nothing was going to be exact, but with similar projects. And we had scheduled about 6 schools to begin with. We ended up at 4 because of the COVID situation. So we were trying to include new construction or renovation and or renovation of buildings, including elementary, middle, and high schools, and the middle schools, 7 and 8, or 6, 7, and 8. We ended up with 6, 7, and 8 in both occasions. Okay, Rich, so the next slide. We went to North Haven and we looked at their renovated middle school. We went to South Windsor, and South Windsor had a project that had 4 elementary schools that were completely rebuilt. We saw one under construction, and they just got the final approval for the 4th elementary school about a month ago. So they've completed 3 of the 4, and we'll talk a little bit about what some of the challenges they ran into. We went to Guilford and saw their newly constructed high school, and the same day we went to Meriden and saw a renovated high school. So those were the places we went. We had some general questions that we asked when we went. We wanted to know if they used owners' reps and what their experiences were. We wanted to know how they decided between renovation and new construction. We wanted to know how they determined the enrollments and how they studied that. And did they consider redistricting? And we also thought it important to hear how they were able to have the appropriate communications to prepare for the referendum. So those were some of the basic things. And then from the design standpoint, we all had lots of questions from the committee. And in each school, we didn't get to each one of these, but generally speaking, we looked at square footage. We looked at the flexible grouping opportunities and the grade arrangements. We looked at science labs. We looked at unified arts. We looked at technology and specialty classes like woodshop or culinary or automotive things. We looked at the special education and pupil services. We checked out the auditoriums. They didn't show us any movies, but we went into the auditoriums. We went into the library media centers. The cafeterias were an important part for us to look at. The gymnasiums, if they were there, and what size and what type of floor they had, all of that. We had questions about the furniture, the storage, use of storage for the teachers. We asked about the energy efficiency and the use of natural gas and other natural energy savings. We went through the administrative offices. We checked all the bathrooms. We wanted to know what the spaces were available for the faculty and how safe the design was and what kind of security there was. And then the big one was how was the parking, and how did the buses drop off, and how did the parents drop off? So you will see, we'll be able to tell you that in some of the schools. Some of those we didn't get answered in every single school, but we had a lot of questions. So the first place we went to was North Haven Middle School. That houses grades 6 through 8. And I'll interrupt here if the committee wants to interject anything that I'm missing. Please feel free to insert your comments. This school serves somewhere between 750 and 800 students. It was a renovated building, so the school was occupied while they did the renovation. They renovated a cafeteria, the gymnasium, and the auditorium, and added a new classroom wing. It took several years to get this all accomplished. It has a brand new library with 2 computer labs. And as we found in many of the schools, there were a lot of maker spaces, and maker spaces, you probably all know, are spots where group projects can be done and things can be assembled and created, and projects can be done by students as a group. This particular school shares fields and parking, and including the pickup areas, with North Haven High School, which had been renovated about 15 years prior to this renovation, but it's all on the same campus. So it was interesting.
I'll just reinforce what Sylvia said. I was surprised when we got there. When I thought of a renovated school, I thought you'd go in, they would take the old building, maybe put a little classroom wing on or something. But basically, they took the majority of the building and knocked it down, keeping the CAF, the gymnasium, the auditorium, built a new classroom wing on one side, and then when that was done, ripped off all the classrooms that were on the other side. So you basically felt like you were in a new building.
And you will see as we go through, Rich had some beautiful pictures, so you'll be able to see the feeling that school generated. So we came away with some impressions from this school. It was very bright and airy, and we liked the amount of glass and the natural light that came in. It had a double entry, and maybe, Rich, let's just go through these quickly because you have photographs of these. We can expand on the photographs. There was a double entry security, and the entry doors had bullet resistant glass. There was a main stairway, which we'll show you. It was very impressive, but it took a lot of space. The classrooms were bright and open. And guess what? The teachers wanted additional storage. Even after the renovation, they commented that they needed additional storage. Lockers for the students were not wide enough to accommodate their backpacks. And we were guided through by the maintenance director, who was quite quick to tell us that they should not have used sheetrock in the hallways, because it's a large maintenance issue. So we had some interesting comments along the way. This school cost about $69 million, and the construction was done by Gilbane Construction. So, Rich, if you want to start, let's go through the pictures. This was the front entrance, and to the sort of left of center was the main entrance, and you can see a lot of glass wall there on the left wing that sticks out. The difficulty we saw with that was all the administrative offices and conference rooms, and it created a privacy issue for people coming to the school. If you were having a conference, then everybody who came into the front door of the school could observe parents and teachers and administrators having conferences. So we had a little concern about the security of that, the privacy of that. The front office was right there among all those windows and was very open and very easily accessible to the public. Again, we felt a little bit of a security concern about having a line of defense before the administrative offices. Although they seemed to be functioning with it well, they did agree that that was sometimes a problem for them. So let's go to the next one. This is the front entry. So you came in the front door, and these are the staircase that you see. Beautifully done with granite or marble or whatever the stone is. Beautiful staircase to go upstairs. And if you go to the next slide, I think you'll see the space that is open. Oh, maybe it's coming up. This is a hallway into the schools. Again, this is combining a modern look with a fairly traditional school corridor. Nice and clean. This is one of the classrooms. This is a science lab, and you'll see that there was a lot of storage on the walls. In between each of the labs, there were 2 labs connected by a storage closet, which was already overfilled with materials. So the teachers quickly told us they needed more storage. Seems like a refrain that we hear a lot.
Could I add something, Sylvia?
Sure.
With the science labs, a lot of what we were hearing also was the need for not just the lab space, but the classroom space and the lab tables.
That's correct.
Together in one room.
Yep, and you'll see that here.
Which you see here, yeah.
So they have the desks to work, but they also have their lab tables right there. And they, as in all of the new schools, all of the facilities for safety were built right in. The sinks and the protective gear and all that was all in that room. So it was airy, it was new, it was bright. The lighting was wonderful. It was all energy efficient lighting. This was the renovated auditorium. Fairly simple, but very adequate, but not adequate to house the entire student population in one auditorium at the same time, as has been the case in most schools we saw. It's a cafeteria. And correct me if I'm wrong, is this the one that had the food service was an outside vendor who came in to provide food service? This was not done by the school system. Do you remember, Jeff?
It was.
Yeah, this was an independent food service company, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So they didn't have their food service in-house, but nice and clean and new, and lunch looked good. Although we were too early to eat, it looked good.
They kept the original cafeteria. It looks like most of the kitchen stuff was brand new as part of the renovation.
Okay, and the next. And this was the gym, which was already there. It was all refurbished, new bleachers. The floor was repaired. The lighting was improved, but it was the original gym that was there. And this is a picture of the library. You can see that there is the books are stacked. If you look beyond the books, there are some maker spaces way in the back by those windows on the lower left slide. And also just outside the library, there are these areas for students to sit and gather and work on
Great.
projects that they're working on. And that front entry, that's all part of the front entry of the school. Okay, so that was North Haven. And then we went to South Windsor, and that was an adventure because we were there for quite a long time, pretty much the whole day, it seemed like. This was a very ambitious project. You all received some information about this somewhere along the line in the beginning, some printed information, and they had embarked on a project to renovate 4 elementary schools and close 1 that existed, which meant some redistricting, and it was quite a big project. It was a 10-year plan. They divided it into 3 referendums to build 4 schools. So the first referendum was to build and these were all elementary schools. That school was built, and we'll show you pictures of that. And that was a brand new school and had been completed about 2 years before we'd been there. Under construction was the Eli Terry building, and that was due to be finished right now. At this time, they were going to be planning to move in August of this year. Because of the COVID, we haven't followed that up, but I don't know where they are. Again, Gilbane was the construction company, and they oversaw the construction, and the school personnel and school people were very positive about their relationship with that construction company. And that school that had been completed was Orchard Hill. Those are the ones we have some pictures for you in a minute. And in that school, they tackled the problem of storage for each grade level. They had a storage room for each grade level. Colliers, you were there as the owner's rep, and had glowing comments from the superintendent of school, particularly because of the ability to work with the state agencies, which determine the reimbursement rates and what should be done. And so their original plan was to remodel schools, and after presenting the plan to the state said they would be better off and would receive more reimbursement to rebuild all 4 elementary schools, to have them all brand new. So that's what they did. They had a very, very effective community information group. The administration provided very, very accurate timelines, and they were aided in Colliers in figuring all the timeline and how all that was going to happen. There was a PAC created and run by the citizens who worked with the town and the Board of Ed to be able to communicate well with the public. They had lawn signs all around town. They really did a great job at promoting the project. Rich, go to the next slide, because I think some of what's here is also duplicated in that one. It became a model that the state has suggested for organizing a multi-school building. They created a 10-year plan. The teachers from all of the elementary schools were represented in the planning groups like we've started. They had groups that they consulted with throughout the process. And they based this 10-year plan on an enrollment study that had shown, as we all have seen, that enrollments were declining. But as well as they planned, they discovered as they were partially through the project that the enrollment was increasing dramatically. And so they had built a plan that would meet the needs of a declining population. They had closed 1 elementary school and now had to adapt that plan to add some classroom space to the 2 schools that were under construction. And so it was a very well thought out, flexible plan. They were able to do that. So the biggest takeaway, I think, and Jeff, I think you'll remember this, the biggest takeaway that I took, and maybe you committee members might weigh in on this, but the superintendent of schools was absolutely focused on making sure that she had the support and the buy-in from all of her staff and the people that work the Board of Education in the project. So she kept them educated all along, and the success of that project in large part was because everybody knew that their school or their particular place, their program was going to be supported in this thing, even though it took 10 years. So as each school opened, all of the people came from all of the schools to celebrate the opening of the school. And that became a very positive thing for the community. And by dividing the referendum up into 3, they were able to get community buy-in. So that was really an important thing to get that plan moving. Committee people, any other comments about that? Or is that a fair representation?
I think it was
Rich?
a fair representation. And it was a celebration for the whole community, each building, because oftentimes, if you're working on one building, it's, people pit against each other as opposed to collaboratively trying to
Right.
buy in together. So that's, I understand that point, Sylvia.
Yeah, and I think she had, the bands came and played from the high school and the junior high, so they really made it into a big event. So that was a very positive way to handle the making sure everybody was on board with the project.
By having the teachers from various schools all work with the architect, no one group of people customized it for their likes or dislikes. So they feel that when they're done, they'll have 4 schools that are all similar in design and program.
Yeah, and that the project was meant to have one cohesive end result. And indeed, at least so far, there are 2 schools now ready to open in September that were brand new, both built at the same time, and 1 more that just got approved at referendum early this spring and will begin next year. So it's been a very successful project. So let's look at some of the pictures. This is the first one that was totally complete, and this is the outside. Quite modern in character, but in many ways a very traditional elementary school, very practical. And you'll see as we go through, this was the outside. Lots of parking areas, and this was the front entry and as you came in the door. Again, the security was top notch and right on target, and with double doors and very colorful. All of the painting, all of the interior accoutrements were, if you thought about it as you went through the school, they were all primary colors, which is an interesting thing from my perspective as a designer. It was very bright, very airy, and it felt like an elementary school. It was great. So let's go from there and see where we are. These spaces were spaces that were outside classrooms in different wings or different hallways, where there were classrooms where students could come out and work on their own, or teacher could take someone out and work with them out in the hallway. They were just small spaces that were bright and cheery, and for that student who needed to have a little more private space to work, they were accessible. There were probably 1 in each main grade level area. And this was a typical classroom. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in those classroom spaces, we were told that they had students, somewhere about 23 to 26 students in a class. I'll have to check my notes and go back to that, or maybe Colliers remembers that. But you'll note that the furniture is flexible, it's movable, it can be configured in many different ways. A lot of storage, bookcases, and that type of thing in plenty of space in the classroom. This is the cafeteria, again, bright, cheerful. The tables fold up. The maintenance people in many of these schools, and maybe this will be an issue going forward with our health concerns in schools, were pleased with tables. I believe these tables folded up, and they could clean underneath easily, because every day at the end of every school day, that whole entire classroom was cleaned. Easier to do that with this type of table than with individual tables and individual chairs that all have to be moved individually. So
Yeah, these have all the built-in stools, and
Yeah.
they have wheels, so they can just be rolled out off to the side.
be rolled and folded up. So. And this was a gymnasium in this South Windsor school. This was a new floor. Help me with this one, Matt. Do you remember, or Rich, do you remember? This was some sort of a composite material, not a wood floor.
Yeah, I don't know what it's made out of. It's vinyl, I think, but
If I can add, it's a poured-in-place floor,
Okay,
almost like a rubberized poured-in-place floor. Yep.
okay, okay. But adequate for the elementary school. Good enough size. Okay. So, so as an overview of that, it was a very positive experience, and we came away saying it could be done. We did tour the schools that were the one school that was under construction. The construction site was meticulously maintained. It was safely done. It was cleaned up at the end of every day. And it was interesting to see how it evolved, because that was one of the sites that had to have an additional classroom or two added to the original plan, and they were able to accommodate that. So that was good. And then we went to Guilford, and you've all heard about what a wonderful school Guilford is. We went to Guilford High School, and it indeed is a spectacular school. Um, um, it was designed by TSK architect, very open, very airy. The cafeteria, it serves as a multi-space. It's open to the main hallway, and it is on a lower level from the main entrance. Main entrance comes in flush with the ground in the front, but the cafeteria and the auditorium and the gymnasium are on a lower level at the back of the building. And all three of those spaces are connected. So the gym, the auditorium are separated by the cafeteria. And that whole area can be locked off from the rest of the school, so that when there are functions for public use, people can come in. There's bathrooms, there's the auditorium. They can have a basketball game in the gym and a play in the auditorium, and the cafeteria can serve snacks, or they can sell, snacks or food or soda or whatever from that auditorium, and keep that space separate from the main school so that public can't wander through the school. It was designed very carefully to support pods, and you'll see pictures of those with separate classroom programmatical things, so that English was one pod and languages might be another. In each pod.
no. In the pod, it was multidisciplinary. So
Oh,
you'd have an English, math, science, social studies,
oh,
world
okay.
language,
I
all
thought-
within a single pod.
Okay, correct me then. I'm corrected wrong. But each pod had classrooms around the outer edge. The center was a core of offices for the teachers, glass window on the front of the office space for the windows that looked out over a group space for the classrooms that were in that pod, that they could do other projects that involved more than one classroom. All the exterior classrooms were on the outside edge, and they had glass walls that looked to this interior space at the end. There were bathrooms contained in that pod, and it could be locked down separately, so that should there be a security problem, that each pod could be self-contained. So that was another measure of their attention to security issues. You'll see as we go through the pictures, they had a large L-shaped library, and Matt was particularly interested in all the innovative, energy efficient ideas that there were in that building, and that they ranged from certain shutters on the windows. They looked at the direction that the classroom was facing and changed the trim and the shutters on the windows to reflect the way the sun came in. They had passive cooling in the floors. It was a very innovative energy thing. And we lost Matt for a little while in the room with all that technical stuff. We had to go get him because he was, but it was fascinating. So let's go to the next slide. All right, we did all this. TSK was the architect. And it was interesting because he came and presented his initial presentation, and they asked for input from both the students and the faculty. And the students came back with some suggestions about the front entrance. They were not happy with the way the front entrance was designed, and they didn't feel it was welcoming enough, and they didn't like it. So the architect sat down with the students and discussed the changes that they thought would be important to change the front entrance. And he put some of those suggestions into the plan to change it. So that made the school feel like it was, much more a collaborative effort to design a school that the students would enjoy. So let's go to the pictures, and that probably will take us to, this is your front entry when you come in, just a drop-off space, lots of parking, special bus drop-off area in the back, the auditorium and the gyms. If you look at that picture, as I'm looking at it, would be on my right, you see that brick extension. The cafeteria and the gym were behind that at a lower level, and it was a separate entrance to get into there. Okay, this is the main hall when you came in. Again, a double locked door at the front door. Main office right there on the right as you came in. Good security there. They have school resource officers in place. This is as you came in the front door. You're standing on the school seal that you can just see in the lower right-hand corner. And ahead of you, the left is a hallway that you take the hallway down, and the pods are off to your left. In that open space in the middle, looks down on the cafeteria. The library will be farther ahead of you on the right, and their administrative offices and nurses' offices are on the right-hand side as we face this picture.
And you can look out all the way. There's all windows in the back area that looked out on the wooded area in the back.
So, yeah, so when you come in, you see right through the building. So it's really very interesting. All right, let's look at this. If you go to the left behind those glass walls there, the pod entrances are where you see that tile on the wall, and that's how you go down the hall to the pods. And you'll see in the next slide probably a better view of how that works, but that's the main hallway and they go off. Here's the entrance to the pods, lockers, and those doors automatically close in the event of an emergency. So everybody who's in that pod at the time stays there safely with the inability to get into that space. And this is what the pod looks like. So your classrooms straight ahead and to your left, and then behind you are classrooms. To your right is the central area where the teachers' offices are. That open space is open space that's used by the classrooms in that pod to do collective learning. And the lavatories are in the hallways as you came in past the lockers. And this is looking down on the cafeteria. So from the front door you come in and there's the cafeteria. There's the difference between the maintenance, because those tables are easier to use maybe for the older children, older students, but all those chairs need to be put up at the end of the day in order to clean. And
the library is up above, and it runs that entire L-shaped area that's up above.
So above is the library, right? And this is their auditorium, worthy of the Academy Awards. Beautiful electronics, beautiful lighting, beautiful sound. Does not accommodate all the students in the school, as none of them do. And the beauty of that one, was that the one that had outside access to load everything into the stage area? I believe so. So that, when you're bringing in sets and all of that stuff that you need to stage a production or any kind of band thing or something, it had direct access to the outside, so you could bring
the shops and everything were right on the hallway behind there.
Right. So that was cool. This is a gym. Pretty much like any other gym.
There were two gyms, a full-size one and a smaller one.
At bleachers on the side. Okay. So that we were very impressed with that school, and there were a lot of takeaways that we talked about in more complete detail in that written report. And then from Guilford, we went to Meriden. In Meriden, we saw Platt High School, and it has been, perhaps any of you who drive over to Meriden, if you go to the mall or into Meriden, have been watching it for the 4 or 5 years being built. The students were in the building while it was built. It was extensively reconstructed. Some of the core facilities remained, but new classroom wings and other facilities were built. It is really, this renovation was probably more conventional in design than anything we saw, because it used a lot of the existing parts of the original building. But it had some very interesting uses for the spaces. There were many architectural places that did show a modern take. The library was glass wall, and if you go by it, you see it when you go by. It's a very large rectangular facility that's all glass on the second floor, and it's beautiful. And there is a cafeteria that overlooks the fields, and their turf field that has a curved wall, and that overlooks the fields. So there are some modern things, but generally for the nuts and bolts use of the school, the classrooms are pretty much conventional in their design. But they
Don't forget the Stairway to Heaven.
Oh yeah, well there's a picture there, Matthew. Wait till you see that one. But they did have a joint venture with the Meriden YMCA, and they have one classroom, a preschool program, and that is operated by the Y. It's available for teachers or any community people who want to have their kids in there if they have enough room. But it becomes a good piece of their program for their students, because many students there are going to go on to careers in either childcare or teaching or whatever. And so the students in the school get to go in there that qualify, get to go in there and be interns and help, and they learn the skills of childcare and child safety and health precautions and CPR and all of that in that school. And the children who are in there are so proud to be there. They wouldn't let us out of the room. They just love that place, and they cheer for the high school kids at the football games and the basketball games. And it's a great collaborative program. They even have a Halloween parade through the school, and they're 3 and 4 year olds. So the high school kids like it, and it's interesting. The other thing is that they have allowed some of the high school classroom space to be used for the Middlesex Community College branch, which is in Meriden and was in danger of closing. So they have an agreement with that school to lease out some of the classroom space after the high school hours are finished, probably from 4 until 9 o'clock at night. The college brings their own security and they make sure that their students are safe. But it's an innovative use of the spaces which otherwise would not be used. And that is open. Those programs are open to the teachers, can take classes there. And the students, if there are AP students or students that would like to take any college courses and qualify, they can also take the courses at that program. So an innovative way to utilize the space. So these are the pictures. Now, this is because we were out in the parking lot. As we arrived, the fire department arrived, and we were in emergency fire drills. So unfortunately, our visit was cut short. We all had to empty the school. But this is the main entrance that is newly constructed and very contemporary in looking. So you'll soon see the staircase that Matt was talking about. This is just a typical hallway. And again, this looks like a conventional high school, not so much glass, and this one was all made with concrete block and tile, easier maintenance. There is the stairway to heaven Matthew was talking about. And this goes up from the main entrance to the second floor to the third floor. And it even in that picture, it doesn't show as imposing as it is. It's a huge staircase in the middle. They laugh about that. Science lab, again, places for students to sit at work tables in the lab, as well as storage spaces around the perimeter, and all of the necessary safety equipment is there. And this is their auditorium, a little fancier. Again, all of them had handicapped accommodations. There's a light board there behind the principal who's standing there. A control sound thing to control the sound there. And again, this one opens out as well, I believe.
But that was state of the art. And for us, it would not, I don't believe it'd be reimbursable. For some reason, somehow, they had either extra money or something. That entire auditorium is phenomenal. You would die for it.
It's beautiful. Maybe it was federal dollars because it's a city. They may have gotten some federal money there. I don't know. We can find that out. Colliers may know. So, but it was lovely. Okay, let's see what we got next. So this was a corridor that was being built. I don't remember where that picture was taken. Oh, is this in South Windsor?
Yeah, that's the new school under
That's the
construction.
new
in
school
South
that was under construction.
July, whatever.
Right. So our takeaway here was that it was important. We heard from all of the administrations in all these places that it was important to have a responsive owner's rep, which I believe we have now. It was important that all the plans be flexible enough to accommodate any plans when it's a long-term plan, especially enrollment and program changes. And just as represented by what's happened right now in the last 3 months to our educational program, we have to be prepared to make changes to a long-term plan as they arise if we need to. The designs were multi-purpose. They were designed to maximize space and recognize the future educational needs. And that will be important to do. And we don't know what those are going to be. So that's a crystal ball we need. So. And the life cycle costs of the facility, including the energy efficiency and the maintenance and security upgrades, and now hygiene. This is one of the storage closets. But the biggest thing that everybody asked for was storage, storage, storage. Every school we went to, they were concerned. This was in an elementary school art room storage, and they've already outgrown that. So, again, we've heard it from our teachers and we've heard it from all of these teachers on the tour. Any other comments from the committee?
Now, having done some construction projects, I know that storage is always one of the last things that, gets looked at and, gets squeezed out because of the way the reimbursements are done based on square footage. So in a lot of schools, quite legitimately, teachers look and they say, got all these materials and I have no place to put things. So I think it is something that as we do any new construction, we really have to keep that in mind.
So our final thought on the matter is what we need is total support of the overall plan concept by the Board of Ed, the administration, and the staff, coupled with an effective process to inform and engage the community, and that will result in a successful project. There's lots more to be learned. We could visit other schools when we get closer, but this just gave us a general overview of what's out there and what the potential for us is as we work with them. And so we go back to Humiston where we started, and the journey begins now. So that's our notes from the 4 schools we saw, and we enjoyed it. We hope you enjoyed our visit with us. And if you have questions, we're happy to answer any of them if we can. So
Great. Thank you, Sylvia. Questions, comments from the group?
everybody should have gone along with us. It was fun.
Hey, Matt, could you take just a couple of minutes to talk about Guilford and particularly the way that they naturally cooled the floors and some of the energy savings things that they did in that building?
Well, they used a passive, the design of the building was set up for also passive energy uses of both the lighting and to control the temperature during the summer and winter. That's what they did with the shutters and the alignment. Some of the things they did, when I first got there, I saw this huge mound and it looked like what is called a Wisconsin mound, which is for wastewater disposal. And it was actually a cooling mound or a heating mound. And what they were doing is they were heating the floors in the winter and cooling the floors in the summer with just cold water, lowering the temperature only a few degrees. But it was a very interesting concept. And I know one of the members of the Board of Ed Tim White is very interested in energy savings and would like to see all that incorporated into our schools. And this certainly was one of the ways of doing it with not a very expensive cost associated with it.
Thanks.
Peter, did you have a question?
I did. Thank you, Sylvia. I guess it's more of a comment than a question, and it surrounds the storage. You know, we're hearing it from our teachers and our staff as the group has gone around to tour the schools here, and even in the newest construction where you have all these wonderful storage areas, they're still utilizing or filling that storage space. And it's one of those situations where I think no matter how much storage you put in, if you made the entire building storage, you would fill the entire building. So there becomes a tipping point with storage. You can only have so much without expanding the footprint of the building. So I would caution us not to get too overly carried away with providing storage space, because you'll always fill it.
We felt that way too. One of my concerns, however, was that in some of the schools, there seemed to be, and I have to be careful about how I phrase this, but there were some architectural details that were really dramatic and beautiful when you came in to see them. But often the space could have been utilized to have a program there or something else. So some of those staircases and the entrances, although grand, and the architects are very creative in designing some beautiful entries and spaces. And a lot of the ceilings were very high. We had some complaints, I think it was from North Haven, from the maintenance people there, because the ceilings were so high and there were a lot of glass that it required high equipment to get up there to clean the glass and the heat problem. So I think we have to strike a balance between being architecturally glamorous and lovely and maybe having room for some other program or something else.
You can certainly see the difference in Guilford and Platt in Meriden. Guilford was light, it was airy, it was a pleasure to be in. Platt, you felt like after walking those halls, you felt like you're in a cave. So yes, there is a waste in letting natural light in, but it also, I think it improves the educational capabilities of the kids to feel like they're in an open space. Certainly the pod situation that they had done, all the classrooms were on the outside walls with all the natural light and the teachers were in the center. It accomplished two things. It accomplished the light for the students, and it accomplished the teachers having the ability to watch several classrooms at once. So yeah, you don't want to just turn an architect free to design what he wants, but if the group had the chance to go to Guilford, I think what we saw in one day is what to do and what not to do.
Right.
I agree. And I think that the light is great, but I think some of those spaces where the glass, North Haven in particular, there were 2 stories of glass that you couldn't even get to clean, which were more difficult to maintain. Whereas the Guilford was all practical. The glass was there. It was for a purpose. It was useful. It was light. It was airy. It made a much different product and easier to maintain. And the efficient qualities.
I saw Andrew and Anne with their hands. I don't know who was first, but Anne.
I was wondering if Jeff could speak to the use of the pods, and that construction was at Guilford High School seemed really, really effective. I've only heard of it in the past used in middle school concept, that those teams. And I'm wondering if Jeff could just comment and tell us, or maybe Rich, anybody who's been a high school administrator.
Yeah.
Is there a difference between high school and middle school in creating that team effect, or is it basically the same thing?
Well, I think one of the things that was really interesting about that plays into any instructional level when you talk to our staff is the development of breakout space. For those of us that were on the tour, will remember that you have the two halls that cut off the main hallway into the pod, and then there's a larger hallway in the back that's also used for like breakout space for small groups and things like that. It's something I saw actually in an elementary school in Weston when I was doing an instructional rounds visit there. Providing that sort of breakout space for small group now work is something that is a real priority for our instructors, our teachers at all grade levels. So that was a unique piece. Segregating a group, maybe if you're looking at freshman academies, which is like an extension of teaming out of the middle school, that might be of interest. I know that's something that we've talked about over years, the possibility of that, but really that design made that breakout space really powerful.
And as you were saying, you see that a lot in middle schools where you try to take a large middle school and break it off into small teams of 80 to 120 students, all working with a group of teachers. This is the first time I've seen it in a high school. I love the design, and you didn't have the bells ringing and the large number of kids passing and all that. They largely seem to stay within their pod areas, but there are scheduling implications for there's program implications. So I think that's something that clearly, if we were going to go down that route at some point, that's something that the high school staff really has to be involved with, because it has some real program and philosophical underpinnings.
Right, and the faculty also worked in teams.
Right.
Because as you mentioned before, their offices, the office space for teachers was not departmentalized. It was interdisciplinary.
Yeah, and what it does is really help communication. Got a student who's got a math and an English teacher, and they're sitting together in an office area and talking together. You don't get the large impersonal facilitating multiple levels of courses, and so how they accommodate all that, I'm not certain. That's something to look at.
They
Well,
said their passing time was very quick. If I'm not mistaken, we questioned that, and they felt that their passing time was less than 3 minutes from pod to
They actually
pod.
stayed within an area.
No, even going outside the area.
Mhm.
It did strike me, though, that there would have to be widespread acceptance for that kind of a model among all of the faculty. There has to be buy-in completely from everybody to work in a different model, such as that, the interdisciplinary team model, rather
Just
than.
because they did that though doesn't mean that it has to be done that way in terms of how the rooms are configured. But there are pros and cons to that.
Yeah.
The high school staff would need to work through.
Andrew, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, just a quick. I was curious as to the student population of Guilford versus Cheshire.
It's
900.
It's about 200, 300 less kids.
300 less kids.
Yeah, 900 to 1,300, wasn't it?
Somewhere in there.
We're at 1,400. I think they're a little over 1,000.
Any other questions? Don?
Thank you. Just had a quick question about the need for an auditorium with permanent seating versus an auditorium that you still have a stage, but you have temporary seating that you can also maybe move in tables if you're having a dinner type function or some other things where you can use it for multi-purposes. Because sometimes I wonder, if the theater look, although it's great for school plays and things like that, doesn't get as much use as a multi-purpose room would be. And I'm not sure if that's something that is being looked at or it should be looked at. I've seen a number of high schools who have multi-purpose auditorium type rooms like that, and it seems to work pretty well for a lot of different functions they have.
Don, I'll speak to that, at least in the couple of schools that we went to, Meriden and Guilford in particular, because those were the high schools. They use it for community functions as well, and it's used quite often for town events and for other things than just the drama part, band concerts and things like that. So the room does get used. I'm not saying you shouldn't consider the possibility, but the music department, I've forgotten the school, help me, was it Guilford, where they had all the band rooms were right from the stage, and they used that as a classroom space to teach all kinds of production type of things and different types of musical concerts and so on. So that was used quite heavily.
No, I get that. I'm just talking more about the stadium seating versus having something that I still think that if you have temporary seating where you can move in tables and move in chairs and things like that, it would get even more use than just
Possibly
for
that's
that. So
something we could consider. They both had large cafeteria spaces connected to those auditoriums, which that could be done in too. So, and
not
those,
always that intimate look that you might get in that type, but that's
true.
Well, the back of Cheshire High School's auditorium was set up for 2 lecture halls.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's still used for that now, but that's what it was used about 100 years ago when I was there.
Is it that long ago?
Pretty close.
To the point about the utility space, if those of you who are on the visit, and there was a photo too in Guilford, they have a huge cafeteria floor space right out in front between the gym and the auditorium that serves as a tremendous multi-purpose room. But they also even open it up at night. People back when you could go out to eat would even come eat food there while your kids are in gym or whatever. They kept the cafeteria open late at night, and so your kids at basketball practice, you could feed your little one and sit at a table and stuff like that. And then it was also kind of common workspace too. So that can be configured into the design, but I think the auditorium style seating in our community really pays dividends over time for like Sylvia was saying, different groups, not just the play and music.
Any other comments or questions, Chuck?
One common thing we heard at the schools in Cheshire was there wasn't one general area where you could convene the whole student body. And we're looking at these schools that you guys visited, and you still can't convene the whole student body. So it's really a question for Chuck. Is that a thing in these schools that you have one assembly area for all the students like that?
Yeah, Chuck Warrington with Colliers. It's a function of what the state is willing to reimburse. They have this rule that they'll only reimburse or help you build for 50% of your population. So any auditorium, especially new ones these days, they're structured for half of the population. The older ones that are being renovated. So if you had an existing, say if your existing school now, your high school, I haven't been in it, but they can accommodate it, right? They'll leave it in place. They're not going to make it cut it in half, but I'd be careful of getting rid of that. And not to say you are, but yeah, they're basically looking at half like North Haven. That was an existing space. So they kept it as is. And I can't remember, I think it was 300 something for the seating. I mean, I was on that project intimately. I know every detail about it that you want to know, but yeah, the policies have to like we're doing Branford, Francis Walsh, and that's a new one. And that's for half of they have 944 is the enrollment. It's only going to be half of it.
Chuck, I know that a lot of the high schools will set up their gyms so that they can accommodate the whole student population. Pomperaug High, when they did an addition a few years ago, that's what they did there. The new gym with all of the bleachers allowed you to bring all the kids in at one time, even though they wouldn't all fit into the auditorium.
Okay. Yeah. Any other questions for the subcommittee? Comments? I am not seeing any. All right, well, Sylvia, thank you. Great presentation. Thank you to you, Rich, Matt, Ann, and Jeff Solon for doing those trips. I know it was a lot of time. Appreciate you reporting back to us. I think definitely some interesting things that we can pull from that and learn from. So thank you very much. And I think everybody has your full report, so appreciate that. All right, next up on our agenda, and I was remiss, I should have said this at the start of the meeting. I think this is the first meeting where we have Chuck Warrington from Colliers joining us officially as our owner's rep. So welcome, Chuck, and we are happy to partner with you and the whole Colliers team. So we're happy to have you with us. And next on our agenda, we were looking to you to give us an update on kind of our first phase here, the discovery and assessment phase of the process.
Yeah, sure. I don't have a formal report, so I
Nope,
do apologize for that.
No, that's fine.
Usually have updates, but essentially where we're at, we are still working on our contract. We have a couple of things we're reviewing just on that aspect. So they incorporated, basically I think the attorneys incorporated all the RFP language into our contract. So it's with our legal. So we're going to work it out. We're not worried about that. We're not holding up anything in that regards. We're putting together a lot of the documentation. So far from what I'm seeing, there's some really, really good documentation thus far. We're working with Vin. Vin's passed off some files to us with some floor plans so we can start evaluating, the existing square footages of the buildings. The big thing really that we're probably waiting for, I think it's just the enrollment study. I think we're going to talk about it a little bit later, is getting those updated enrollments for what they call the background for the existing, and then ultimately getting support to go, okay, for the different scenarios that we end up developing, having the support to go, what are the enrollments school by school? Right now, your elementary schools are lumped in together as one. So we need those broken out. So I know we're going to be working on that. But as far as putting the discovery and the assessment, we have a lot of good data already. We did a lot before the interview, if you can tell. We put a lot together already, just looking at all your sites, pulling the GIS graphic cards, looking at topographies, just high level stuff that doesn't take a lot of time really to pull together. You just got to know where to find it half the time. But really what drives a lot of these is knowing what size schools you have now, what's the enrollments, what's the projected enrollments, so we can look at it and go, is it undersized, oversized, right sized? And then the next step will be for us is we want to coordinate a site visit to come out and just get a feel for the schools. I know Mark Sklenka, from our office, he attended some walkthroughs, but we just want to kind of walk through, just kind of get a feel for them. We don't want to study them really in depth, just want to go, okay, what's the general condition of the schools? Are they good candidates for, as a renovation, or do we think these things really need to maybe be replaced, as you talked about SouthWindsor that we're intimate with? 2 schools were meant for renovation. They end up turning them into building new for those. So, but we have a really good head start. It's not going to, in another couple of weeks, we'll have a lot of this information together. Then I think the next step is really talking about the options and how do we want to look at those, because we have a open palette, it appears right now. I know some other studies, Perkins Eastman did some studies years ago. Are there any options there that anybody thinks are valid, or are we just cutting fresh and going, hey, you guys take a look at it, make recommendations based upon the enrollments? So those are the next steps to talk about, those different scenario options. Talk about the sensitivities of redistricting. Redistricting is one thing, but if there's an option to say, shut down a school, that's very sensitive. Everybody likes their schools or local schools. So not to say that that's going to be an option. It may or may not, we don't know. But just kind of talk about those in general to get an idea from the committee is, and also sometimes people have options that are preconceived. Like, hey, this is what the plan should be. What we always recommend is let the data tell us what it should be, and pick from those and evaluate. So, but so far we're going very well. We're getting everything put together. It's coming together quickly. I think getting that demographer on the team for us to collaborate with them and have that resource is really important.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chuck. That actually rolls very nicely into our next agenda item, which is the enrollment study. And I know everyone received some information prior to this meeting in terms of what we're looking at for that. So Vin, I don't know if that's you.
I'll talk about it. Hi,
right.
everyone. And then Chuck could help me because Chuck and I spoke last week and then early today. So what I sent to Arnett that she distributed to the committee members and everybody on this video is, essentially the request for proposals. We'd like to send this out tomorrow. In speaking to Chuck, the firms that we would send it to, because there's really just a few firms in Connecticut that do this, and Chuck's familiar with them. NESDEC is one that we've been using on the school side for years. Milone McBroom, who does this, we've talked about that. Urbanomics did this study that was part of Perkins Eastman back in 2017. And then Chuck suggested that we also include Peter Prouda, who's a consultant that does enrollment studies. And he worked for the Department of Education in Connecticut for a number of years. As far as the study itself, we're asking for three basic pieces. The basic scope is a 10-year enrollment study that takes into consideration the students that we have, birth rates, and then beyond that, real estate trends, potential future planning, building permits issued, migration rates in and out of the district will have to be considered. So it's more comprehensive than we get from NESDEC every year. The thing that Chuck added that I do want to highlight in the basic scope is this capacity and utilization study. So as part of this, to look at each of the schools, and assess the number of current classrooms and how many classrooms or how many students we can fit into our current spaces. So, that's something that's different that we haven't talked about before, and I think it's a great idea. And then, as part of this initial scope, there would be a presentation of 2 hours made. We're also asking for pricing on additional scenario development. As Chuck just mentioned, we may have scenarios as a committee that you'd like to see evaluated. If you close a building or two buildings, consolidate, redistrict, expanding buildings. So those are all scenarios that, can be developed, and we're asking for unit pricing as they do each of those scenarios. And then finally, we're just asking for price if we need additional meetings, kind of a unit price for that as well.
Great.
So this will be issued, by email to these firms tomorrow, unless there are some, objection to what we're asking for. I think it's very comprehensive. We're ready to go. We have everybody's email address that we need to send this out, and looking to get responses by next week.
Great. And then just because I don't know any better, we have responses next week. However, we pick someone in another week after that. How long typically does the study itself take?
May I take a crack at that, Vin, if you want? It depends. I think to do the background, I'd have to check on our last one. If they come in fresh, I think NASDAQ's already been working with the data, so they would, if they were selected, they'd probably have a jump start. Okay. But probably, I'm thinking probably 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay. Just curious.
What I'm thinking for that. But we can start working with the information you have already from NASDAQ and start extrapolating, talking about existing enrollments in your schools, because the school's going to have them anyways, and we can kind of get a feel for some of that already.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah,
great.
From a process point of view, as these proposals come in, we'll circulate to the committee members, but I'll leave it to you, Chairwoman, how you want to make a selection. Can do it as a group. People can make their own comments. We can, get some guidance from Chuck, but you could think about that. We don't have to decide that tonight.
Okay. Yeah, I certainly, yes, I appreciate that. Would certainly want everyone in this group to review what comes in. Not sure I have the expertise in terms of picking this, so would really lean on you and Chuck a lot for the selection, but certainly want to give everybody a chance to weigh in. So, but we can think about how that best works. Any questions, comments from anybody else on that? Jeff Pagara, was that you or no?
No, sorry. No
Okay,
comment.
no, that's okay. I just didn't want to miss you. All right, I don't see any. Okay. Arnett, do we have any comments, questions from the public standpoint that we need to address at this point? Nothing? We can't hear you.
Sorry, we have
That's
nothing.
okay.
There are no comments that we've received. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right. I think that's going to close out the public portion of this meeting. We're going to actually go into an executive session to discuss potential real estate purchase and lease. Rob, sorry.
Hi, Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And I wanted to make sure I did this at the end and not to get in the middle of this meeting. But, you know, I applaud everyone's hard work on behalf of the town of Cheshire, but I'd like to just take a moment to recognize really what's going on within our country these days. You know, we're combating the COVID-19 situation. We're all mourning, you know, the death of George Floyd. And obviously there's significant unrest around that situation. Businesses are being looted, and there are peaceful demonstrations and there are not peaceful demonstrations. And I guess what I would say is our country is just very divided at the moment, and that saddens me deeply. And we always start our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance, and we talk about we're one nation under God with liberty and justice for all. And I think we need to pay much more attention to what we're saying when we read that, because clearly our country doesn't feel that way at this stage. And I just hope and pray that we can all find a way to come together for the greater good. We are one, united for one great purpose. And I think that says it all. And I just hope that we can all think about what's going on in this country and each do our part to be a productive piece of where we go from here. Because I think we all need to do our part to begin to bring this country back together. And it could start in a town like Cheshire. We have such a wonderful community of such great people. And maybe it just takes us with a little bit of a movement here and we can start doing it. And so I'm sorry to bring this up in this meeting, but I just, it's really been weighing on me for the last many days. And I certainly will be talking more about this in the town council meetings as well. But, you know, we do have a great community, and I know we have issues here too. I'm not suggesting we don't. But nonetheless, we do need to rise up together and support each other, regardless of our backgrounds, regardless of the color of our skin, regardless of where we come from. And I think Cheshire exemplifies that generally. And I'm just saddened by what's going on in this country. And I know you all are too. And I just wanted to take a moment to recognize it and know that we're all in this together and we'll get through this together. And I guess that's it. I'm not sure what else to say, but it's a rather emotional issue for a lot of us these days. And I just think we'll get through this together. And it's sad to see what's going on in this country right now. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to say a few words.
No, thank you, Rob. Well said. I think we all feel the same way. These are really unprecedented and crazy times, and it is a sad situation that everyone is dealing with. So appreciate those words.
You're welcome. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely. Okay. So Arnett,
we need a motion to go into executive session.
Okay, thank you.
To include all of the members of the committee and Mr. Warrington and me, because I'm running the Zoom meeting.
So moved.
And then as soon, okay, Sylvia.
Second.
Okay. Anyone opposed? Okay.
Okay. Now we just have to give Mr. Salamini a moment, and he will stop videotaping and recording, and he will give us the heads up when we're ready to go.
Perfect, thank you.
No action to follow, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
So I'll stop the stream.
Yep.